Chapter 17. At last, completion is at hand. The one thing needed for our becoming whole is now within my awareness, within my sphere of influence. My calls for him, her, it have reached across the vastness and have been heeded. Now our future is assured. Soon nothing will be able to stand in our way, for all will be within our power, a power that will know no bounds. Events are now reaching their climax, and then when all the energies are taken and absorbed, then will come our apotheosis. It's only a matter of time. "Where are we, Professor?" asked Ace. "I told you, the home of the Pangistri. But I always thought the Pangistri lived on Kandassi," said Aaron. The doctor shook his head. No. That's merely a way station, a point of transit." He waved his arms about the room. "This is the real Kandassi, a space station over 300,000 miles above the surface of Kirith." Raphael, who had not said a word since arriving, but had instead continued to gaze out into space, turned back to the others. His eyes were afire with wonder and excitement. "The stars, they're beautiful up here, but so different. So much more constant and steady." "No atmosphere," explained Ace smugly, recalling her science classes. "They don't twinkle because their light isn't diffused like it is down on the ground." "But Kirith has 2 moons," he said. "I can only see one." That stumped Ace. She looked to the doctor for help. "You're in the other one, Raphael," he answered, and the others looked at him in disbelief. "Come off it, Professor." The doctor looked hurt. "Kandassi is gigantic, Ace, over 1,000 miles in diameter. It's made of a highly reflective metal. Down on the planet, it would look like a natural satellite." He bent down to examine the nearest wall. "I shouldn't wonder if it's the same living metal their seacraft are made of, probably of a very high density too. The gravitational pull it exerts could account for the changeable climatic conditions down on Kirith." "But why do the Pangistri stay up here?" persisted Ace. "Safety," said Aaron. "Who could reach and attack them in space?" "That's partly the reason," said the doctor. "But the weightlessness of space could also provide the ideal environment for biogenetic experiments of a very delicate nature." "Like what?" Ace demanded. "Come on, Professor. Don't you think it's time to tell us what you know?" she thought. The doctor considered for a minute, and then looked thoughtfully at Raphael and Aaron before continuing. "Think about it. The greatest geneticists ever came here in Kandassi thousands of years ago to a dead and sterile planet. Since then, a race developed on this planet, bypassing war and aggression and all the other trials that evolution throws at any other species." Ace frowned and looked at Aaron and Raphael. Even Aaron's blue-tinted skin had paled with a dawning realization. "A perfect race." He pronounced the words with irony. "Beautiful, happy, talented, healthy. Even their wounds clear up in a few hours. But there are people with no history. Their ancient ruins are fakes, their histories are fabricated. Miril couldn't remember his parents, and I bet Raphael never knew his grandparents. Because they never had any." "What are you saying, Doctor?" asked Aaron, although she already knew the answer. "You and Raphael, even Hulda, aren't Kirithons. All your ancestors were born and bred up here by the Pangistri, and then sent down to the planet." He pointed down to the brown sphere below him. "Kirith isn't a civilization, or a utopia of peace and harmony. It's nothing more than one giant laboratory experiment." He paused to gauge the reaction of Aaron and Raphael. Aaron was visibly shocked, but there was a strange tranquility about Raphael. The doctor clapped his hands together. "Now," he said, "shall we go and meet our unwilling hosts?" Reb2 looked away from the video screens with irritation as Fetch entered the room. "What is it?" he demanded wearily. "Forgive me for disturbing you, my lord," Fetch whimpered, "but I'm worried about my mistress." "The matriarch?" asked Reb2. There was evident concern in his voice. "What is wrong with her?" "She paces her chamber continually and will not rest," Fetch said. "She is beginning to mutter strange words to herself, and is possessed of a new vigour." A single tear fell from Fetch's eye. "She has dismissed me from her service." Rep2 raised a questioning eyebrow. He knew of the matriarch's fondness for Fetch. "She said she would no longer be held responsible for me. Said that I was to seek sanctuary down on the planet's surface. I sensed sadness in her voice, But when I protested, she had me flung out of her rooms. As much as he found Fetch's presence distasteful, Reptu felt sympathy for the faithful servant. He nodded to the screen on which the doctor's party was shown leaving the transporter room. 5,000 years of waiting is finally at an end, Fetch. Apotheosis is within reach. Within hours our task will have been achieved, he said. The Grand Matriarch has an awesome burden to bear. Now, especially, she dare not be swayed by foolish emotions. He smiled, not unkindly. Rest assured that after today you will regain her favours. It is not the end, Fetch. It is the long-awaited new beginning for us all. Ace had never been particularly afraid of heights, but crossing a narrow bridge which had no handrail and which swayed worryingly over an abyss of several thousand feet was enough to give her pause for thought. But as it was the only way across from the transporter room to the main part of Kandassi, there was no alternative. Holding on to the Doctor and Raphael's hands, with Aaron bringing up the rear, they edged slowly across. There was no sound to be heard. The towers rising out of the abyss still throbbed with lights, but through the windows none of the Pangistri could be seen. When they reached the other side, Ace remarked on this. "So where's the welcoming committee?" she asked. "This place is about as dead as a dodo." "It does have an abandoned feel to it," agreed the Doctor quietly, and raised a hand to touch his throat. Was it his imagination, or was it getting hard to breathe? "It's not dead, though," said Raphael, and the other three looked at him. "Can't you hear it?" he asked. The others strained to hear the soft, pulsing sound resounding in the emptiness. It reminded them almost, but not quite, of a human heartbeat. That sound seemed to be accompanied by yet another, this time a sibilant, seductive lilt, serving as a counterpoint to the dominant melody. "It reminds me of something." "It's a Corinthol," said Raphael evenly. "Spook City," thought Ace. "That's all we need, a haunted space station." The Grand Matriarch looked on greedily at the progress of the Doctor and Ace. Now, at last, the events which had been started 5,000 years ago would reach their conclusion. On a table by her side there glistened in the moonlight the helmet which had crowned so many Kerathan heads over the past centuries. Now it was waiting for its final recipient. Soon the suffering of Lilith would be over, and the Grand Matriarch would know power, power unmatched since the beginning of time itself. They had just begun to descend the stairway on the far side of the abyss when they received their first and only warning. Something thudded dully behind them. The Doctor looked back and saw the hull of Kandassi buckle and begin to fall in on itself. "Everybody down the stairs!" he cried, and sent his companions tumbling down the steps. Ace gave forth a violent curse as she tumbled headfirst. From somewhere, far off, an alarm screeched as emergency precautions were automatically put into operation. Doors throughout the whole of Kandassi closed and sealed themselves off. The Doctor's party looked on aghast as a whole portion of wall simply dissolved and opened out onto the void of outer space. Air whooshed out of the space station, sucking them out into the vacuum. The windows in the towers burst and shattered and flew towards the hole, showering them in lethal shards and slivers of glass. Blinded by the shower of debris rushing towards the opening, the Doctor grabbed a handrail on the stairwell support and reached out to grab the hand of Aaron, who was slowly being sucked out. A body thudded into them, and in vain they tried to catch Raphael as the outrush of air dragged him out into open space. With aching and bloodied fingers, Raphael tried to hold on to the edge of the steps to save himself. But the force of the wind was too strong. He made one last despairing effort to drag himself forwards, and then felt the strength drain from his body. He moved inexorably towards the break in the hull, and thudded against hard metal. Dazed, he looked at the hull. There was no trace of a break. All around him, air roared back into the room. On the staircase, the Doctor was helping Aaron to her feet. A door slid open, and Reptu stepped out. He looked down on them with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Thank you," gasped the Doctor. "It was nothing, merely a telepathic command," said Reptu. "What happened? Kandassi identified you as intruders, so it defended itself, rearranging its molecular structure to send you into space." Reptu's tone hid his concern, not for the Doctor's well-being, but at the event which had led up to Kandassi's act of self-defence. Normally, the Grand Matriarch constantly kept the space station's living metal in check, regulating its every action. For Candace to have acted on its own initiative meant that she must have abdicated command. It had taken 3 of Pangistri's most powerful telepaths to command the space station to seal the hole in the hull. "But there is no advantage in killing you 3, he continued. "Ace!" cried the Doctor. "Where's Ace?" "Safe," said Reptu equanimously, "but you will never see her again." Raphael shook the old man by the shoulders. "What do you mean? What have you done to her?" Reptu seemed taken aback by Raphael's violence. "She is joining the Grand Matriarch." "No!" The Doctor's voice was hard and full of menace. "You don't understand, Doctor," said Reptu. "Without the Earthchild, the whole universe is doomed. What is her life compared to countless billions? I appreciate your concern, Doctor, but the facts are simple. Ace must die so that the rest of creation may live."